What is up? It's funny, the boys never know when or what I'm going to do a video on. They just see me grab the camera and start filming. I guess it's not really filming anymore, is it? There's no film involved. But I got a question for you guys. How much land should the federal government own in the United States?
Where the federal buildings are.
Whether that's a good answer. Where the federal buildings are. Then we would ask the question: how many federal buildings should there be?
Post office.
Not many.
Police.
Did y'all know that the federal government owns like a third of all the land in the United States? It's crazy. There's this current thing, and I know y'all don't follow this kind of stuff. There's this current thing going on in Oregon where these cattle ranchers / militia guys have taken over a wildlife refuge building. It's way out in a rural area. It's wilderness area, wildlife refuge area. Because the federal government for decades has taken over public land, and under the guise of protecting wildlife and that kind of thing. Well, these ranchers out there used to, well, they still do. Now they have to pay the federal government for allowing their cattle to graze on those now federally owned lands, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a long story, and that's why I just asked the basic question: how much land should the federal government own? I honestly believe it should be very limited, just like the powers of the president should be limited. The owning land should be limited. It should be the states should own that land, and I think that we should go through. If I was elected president, the first thing I would do is go see how much land we could turn back over to the states, and each state would decide what they wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
That would be the proper thing to do. But this group of people are calling them militia. I guess they call themselves militia, but they're really basically representing cattle ranchers who the federal government is, starting to limit their use of the land. This is grazing land. And the ranchers actually pay grazing fees for them to be there. So out in Oregon, they basically don't have fences, apparently. I guess some don't. And the cattle can roam on federal land and, graze, and everybody benefits from that. But anyway, I just think it's interesting. Hopefully that situation will end peacefully. Apparently the local FBI are familiar with them, and they expect this kind of thing, this to end peacefully. But just think about it when you're doing your civics lessons and your history lessons, how much, and how much more land do we give up? Will there come a day when there is no private ownership of property, which is really the foundation of freedom and capitalism? Ownership of property is really, in the end, really all you have as far as being a free society. If you're always walking around on somebody else's on the federal government's property, you're always subject. You're always a subject to the federal government. So being able to own your own land gives you a certain amount of sovereignty. So anyway, Alex had no idea.
No, I know what you're talking about.
I mean, you know what I'm talking about,
Those
but you
guys-
don't know the story.
Those guys even said they don't want to use any lethal force unless lethal force is used against them.
Well, and there's a background story where these older fellas, these older cattle ranchers, have always protested this, and the federal government has come up with charges against them terrorism charges and put them in jail for, a certain amount of time, and then they were released, and then another judge said, no, you didn't spend enough time. You see, there's a lot of politics involved, and that's what happens when you give the federal government that kind of power. That's what happens. They abuse it. So, these guys went back to prison. They reported back to prison, and now one of them's like 70-something years old. He's probably going to die in jail. Is that right? Is it right for American citizens, to have to die in jail over land, So anyway, just a thought, and thanks for watching, guys.